Hello and welcome back to Mike at MikeColeen.com. So if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, and remember, click that like button and go ahead and make a comment. So today we're going to talk about, or going to share just a little bit about my childhood and my just a part of my spiritual journey. It's been a really long one, very in depth, took lots of twists and turns. So when I was a little kid, I'll start out here and I'll lead into some interesting things. Buddha Calm, Uncle George Naopi, the Big Kahuna, etc., and some American Indians. So when I was a little kid, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years old, there was a blue jay in my neighborhood, and I could always go outside whenever I wanted to see it, and I didn't whistle or anything, but I kind of just sat there, and I understand now, but back then I didn't quite understand what I was doing. But I could call the blue jay to me, and it would fly to me and it would land on my shoulder. So without whistling or making any kind of noise, I would just go outside and stand out there, and I'd kind of look up in the sky, and I'm not going to describe it very in depth, but I basically mentally would call the blue jay to me, and sure enough, within 2 or 3 minutes it would come flying out of the sky and land on my shoulder. Well, one day my dad saw this and he was just blown away. He's like, "Oh, here's Michael, can you do that again?" And so he went inside and got the camera, and I got the blue jay to fly to me. And he goes, he was like, keep it there. And he ran inside and he took some pictures of it. Now, I don't know where those pictures are. Hopefully, maybe someone in my family still has it. I actually don't know. So at one point, my brothers asked me to do it and wanted to see if I could get it to go inside, walk around inside. And sure enough, I got the blue jay to come to me, and I could walk inside, in and out. Now, blue jays are very wild birds. They're very skittish of people. So that was kind of a really interesting feat. Now, when I was a kid, we had moved to Wisconsin, and our favorite friends, which lived down the street from us, literally about 8 houses away, they ended up moving back to Mississippi, and they flew me and my sister out there. And early one morning, it was probably about 6:30 in the morning, we were getting ready to go fishing at the lake, and we were at the cabin. It was just me, Fred, and his dad, Mr. Sanford. And I went outside. I was waiting for him, and because I was really bored, and there was this butterfly, and I held my hand out. And Mr. Sanford walked out with some fishing poles, etc. And he goes, "Oh, Michael, the butterfly is not going to fly at your finger." I said, "Yeah, well, I'm calling it. It's going to come to my finger." He goes, "Oh, Michael." And as he's walking by, sure enough, the butterfly flies up and right onto my finger. And so he was like, "Oh, Michael, can you keep it there?" I was like, "Yeah, I can keep it here." So he's, "I'm going to go and get a camera." And so he went inside and took a picture. And they used to have it in their living room, on one of the tables in their living room. Now, you know what? I lost contact with him, and I really doubt they have the picture. But who knows? Maybe I'll bump it in and find that picture. But that was just another little thing that I could do. I could just call animals to me. So when I was a little kid, living in the same home, for some reason, my dad and I, now, if we jumped our backyard fence, there was a huge field. It was like, I don't know, 1,000 acres or 2,000, but it's a massive field. And there was cows and horses back there, etc. So my dad and I forget why we were going back there, and normally we would jump the fence, but for some reason we didn't. So we had to go out front of the house and go down our street, and then about 4 houses, and take a right and go about 8 houses over. And then we had to take a quick right, and it was really like 2 houses, and there was like a dead end right there. And there was the entryway to the field. And so I believe I was on a three-wheeler, like a little tricycle, and I was kind of ahead of my dad, and I'm going really fast. I was just spinning my legs off. And as we took the right turn, I wasn't really paying attention, and then I looked up and I noticed there was 3 horses there, and it's like, "Oh, horsies." And then there's these Indian men. Now, the reason why I have this picture, because they literally were dressed in full regalia. They had their headdress on. They had bright colors and the war paint, etc. And I think they even had a spear like that, because remember they had some kind of stick with feathers coming off. It might have been a bow and arrow. I don't remember, but all of a sudden, all 3 of them turned around and looked at me, and I scared the crap out of me when they turned and looked at me, and I just like stopped, and I think I tipped over, and I kind of got back up and kind of got him back on my back on my little tricycle. I tried to turn and go to my dad. My dad goes, Michael, just relax. It's okay. It's okay. So I was like really close. I was probably about 3 feet from the horses. Now I'm looking up at these American Indians. These were like legit Indians. And they didn't have their shirts on, just like this image. And when at first I was like, oh, cool, horsies and Indians, like a little kid. But man, when they turned around and looked at me, there was this like very like calm demeanor, like very solid and grounded. And that's what scared me. So what happened was my dad walks up and goes, Michael, it's okay. And one of the Indians, in a very low, very baritone voice, and he had a very strong accent too, he said to my father, your son is a clown. Now at the time, I didn't know what they were saying. And my dad goes, what? He goes, what? He goes, your son, he's backwards. Again, I didn't know what that. I know now, and I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, and as a little kid, I was like, what? And I remember my dad kind of looked at him like lost, like, because I think my dad was like, what are they being rude? Like, I don't think he understood. And he goes, your son, he's very, very spiritual. My dad goes, oh, okay. So my dad himself was actually a very spiritual guy, very in tune with animals. He did very well with animals. And in tune with Mother Nature. He's always fishing or hunting or doing something, but very respectful. So let me move on to this. So essentially, as I move through my life, getting older and learning more about the spirit world, there's something called a heyoka, or super empath, whatever. And the thing what they were saying was basically like, your son's a heyoka. So, I'm sure you guys know what a heyoka. Heyoka is, there's an Indian tribe in America. I think there might be 2 of them actually, but they have to go through a very specific ceremony, and basically these are people that are born very spiritual. And these are the healers of the tribe, okay? So heyokas are basically clowns. They're funny. It's all about using laughter, and they're backwards. So what they do is they do things in reverse to get you to see things from the complete 180-degree perspective. See, the reason why most people are stuck is because they're locked onto one perspective, and this is the way this situation is, or this is the way life is, or this is the way men are, or women, or people, or whatever, and you're just stuck on one perspective of 360 degrees. Not to mention 360 degrees up to down and round, not just in a flat circumference, okay? So this is something that I wasn't trained in, but it's something that I began to realize that I was doing with my clients was I was always helping them to radically shift their perspective. I would yell, I would scream, I would use comedy, I would jump around, I would suddenly become an actor. And that's very much what heyokas do. And I would literally at times walk backwards or have them reverse and have them physically stand up and go backwards. So this is very much what a heyoka is. They're a clown, they're backwards, just like the American Indians said. They're very deeply spiritual. As a very young child, we moved to Wisconsin from California to a very, very small town of 2,800 people. And what it did was I went from a city of about 40,000 people in Northern California, not too far from Sacramento, about 30 minutes drive or 25-minute drive, and then from San Francisco about 45 minutes, something like that. So there's a lot of people in that area, so we moved to this tiny little farm town, ridiculously small. And they talked weird, they had accents. Instead of saying water fountain, they say bubbler, and like everything was just radically different. But one thing I learned was about 2 years later, I started taking on their values, their beliefs. I started using the word, where's the bubbler, and wears the soda pop and, that Wisconsin accent, Minnesota. And so I remember one day, about the third day we were there, I remember looking back at California in my mind's eye going, yeah, they are weird out there. Because that's one thing they kept telling us, oh, you guys are weird. You're weird. Those California people are weird. And I remember moving out there, I was very proud and still am proud to be from California. But I did get to a point and I was like, wow, that's weird. I'm now looking at California the way people here look at that. So what I realized that had happened is I was now seeing the world from a radically different 180 degrees opposite perspective. And that became the guiding post for my life. Now this was after the American Indians. That was about 4 years earlier when I met them. But I had realized I started seeing things from a radically different perspective. So we call it broadening your horizon. But what I realized, then we moved to another city when we came back to California, and that was totally different, just way bigger city and another radically different experience. So this became a theme in my life. I always wanted to see things from other people's perspectives, literally like step into their shoes, step over the line onto their side of the fence, step into their shoes facing the same direction that they're facing mentally, emotionally, physically or whatever, because I wanted to understand things from their perspective. And this is what I do with my clients. Again, no one taught me how to do this. Nobody ever mentioned this to me. It was just something I learned if I could see things from other people's perspectives, I could understand their problems, and then I could understand how to fix their problems because I could see from both sides of the fence, from both directions, and go, oh, this is why they're stuck, because they view this like this and they see this like that, and this because of this they believe that. So then what I do is basically unwind the puzzle. So unwind the very thing that's keeping them stuck in depression or sadness or emotional trauma or whatever. And it was like there came a point in time when I was doing therapy with people where it was just a free-for-all. There was no step 1, step 2, or technique 1, technique 33. It was just like, what's going on here? I would just listen, and I would learn to open up, to receive everything, to feel it, to see it, to hear it from their perspective. And all of a sudden, therapy with people became very, very easy. So let's move on to the second story. So this is Uncle George Naopi in the image right now. He is or was the big kahuna of Hawaii of Huna at the time when I trained with him. So I'm going to go rewind. This is a really fascinating thing that happened. So when I was a little kid, my mom and dad divorced when I was about, I think, 5.5 years old, and we had 2 restaurants and 2 bars built onto each of them. And they got divorced, etc. And I'm just gonna cut to the chase. So my dad moved to Hawaii when we moved to Wisconsin. Okay. So my dad, by the way, he opened up the Ken's House of Pancakes out there. That's why he moved out there, was to open that up, train everybody. And he was out there for I think it was 7 years. I don't know exactly, but I had basically no contact. He sent us a letter once in a while. Our mom was really like, nope, don't want to have nothing to do with dad. And she basically blocked him out, but whatever. So here's what happened. He sent me it's made out of lava. And it was actually blessed by Uncle George Naopi. And you have to get permission to send anything back, like lava, rocks, because you're not allowed to do it. And if you do it, there's like a evil spirit thing that happens. The goddess Pele gets pissed off and kind of messes with you. So you're not supposed to do that unless you get an official or someone like Uncle George Naopi to bless it and all that stuff. So he sent it back. It had my name in Hawaiian, which is Makai, M-I-K-I. And I don't know if he wrote it in that letter, but what ended up happening was years and years later, I found my dad when I was 19. He had moved back to California. And I ended up living with him for 1 year, like literally May 15th and May 15th, exactly that day. And somewhere along the line, we were in the kitchen, me and my dad were talking, and he just out of nowhere leans forward and his eyes kind of dilated. They got really, I don't know, I want to say dark, but not in a bad way. It kind of caught me off guard, and I leaned back, and he goes, Michael, he goes, one day you're going to meet this little man. His name is Uncle George Naope. I'm kind of like, what? He's the big kahuna. Now, I think at the time, I think I literally laughed. And he goes, no. He goes, I'm not kidding. Because back then, the big kahuna was always kind of like a cartoon thing. Or like, hey, the big kahuna, like for like a beer or party. And he goes, no. He goes, Michael, I'm not joking. He goes, you are literally going to meet the big kahuna. I'm like, what are you talking about? When? Like, you mean like next week or something? Like, does he go to the restaurant? He goes, no, Michael, just trust me. You're going to meet Uncle George Naopa, the big kahuna. It's going to be very important. I was like, oh, okay, Dad. And I thought my dad was kind of being weird. Well, lo and behold, it was about, I don't know how 3 years later, 4 years later, I don't remember how much longer, but I wasn't living with my dad anymore. I moved away. And next thing you know, things fell into place, and I got this money out of nowhere. Because suddenly I wanted to go to this 5-week training in Hawaii for this NLP training, etc. Actually, I went to one before that. And then, like, this was like the big one. And I had to go, but I didn't have the money. And all of a sudden, boom, the money literally fell into my lap. I remember Pastor Gainey goes, Michael, if it was meant to be, then God will open a door for you. And man, did he freaking open it up. So I got the money for the training, which was around $5,000 or $6,000, and then I got the money for the airfare, but not the hotel. And I had enough money for food, so I just said screw it, and I went. And I was like, something's gonna fall into place. And sure enough, most people were paired up before they got there to save money on the hotel fee, because it was 5 weeks. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna be able to afford that. I was in college and I was broke. And what ended up happening was Dr. Tad James said, hey, raise your hand if you don't have a room yet. Or I had a room, but I was like paying the full amount for the first day or two. And I ended up, some guy, they said, raise your hand if you don't have a roommate. And I raised my hand, and some guy just looks at me, hey, you could stay with me. He goes, and I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. And I was like, cool. So I'm figuring, well, I'm going to save money on it. But I still didn't have enough money. So when we got up to the room, I said, hey, I got to be really honest with you, dude. I don't have enough money to pay for the whole 5 weeks. So, I'll stay as long, and then I don't know what I'm doing after. He goes, no. He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, I'm rich. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm rich. I'm like, yeah. He goes, you don't got to pay nothing. He goes, it's all paid for. It's all covered. He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll even buy dinner once in a while. He goes, don't worry about it. I was like, wow, thanks. So that, like, everything fell into place. So sure enough, we're in a training, and it was about the second week of the course, something like that. And again, I'd never heard of Uncle George, never, except for my dad that one day, and it just went in one ear out the other. I just thought my dad was being weird. I literally was like, oh, Dad's just being weird. And sure enough, this little man walks in, and they're introducing the big kahuna, Uncle George Naope. And I've said this in 2 videos. One recent I actually just made just now. I'm going to upload eventually. But a long time ago I said it. But basically what happened was, as he was being introduced, he walked all the way from the front, all the way around, and I was almost to the very back, and he walks right up to me, and he looks me in the eyes, and here's the thing, his eyes changed exactly the way my dad's did, and it was that his pupils dilated, and it kind of got really dark, and he goes, you are already a very, very powerful healer. He goes, you can heal people right now. You don't need to learn how to do it. You already know how. All you need to do is open up. So now, onward to another small man. I don't have his image, but right here, that's me on the left. And on the right is Buddha Chandi. So this is not the monk that I worked with to really learn all the healing stuff and consciousness work, etc. This was afterwards at another temple. So I worked with Buddha Calm. He was the one. So I went through a huge spiritual awakening after my training in Hawaii. It was, in fact, here's an interesting thing. A really weird thing in Hawaii was, in a good way, was a gentleman from Australia. He might have actually been Aborigine now that I think about it. It never really dawned on me. But he came up to me during a break. It was like a 20-minute break, bathroom break, and I was kind of hanging out by the rail just outside of the door to the classroom. And he walks up to me, and he had that same look in his eyes that my dad did and Uncle George Naopi. And he had said, he goes, is it okay if I talk to you? I was like, yeah, sure. Like, don't worry about it. Because at the time I was actually ranked #1 in the nation in kickboxing. I was a pretty tough looking dude. and so I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. I thought he was like afraid to talk to me, but that's not what it was. It was the subject, and he had said, he goes, I just want to let you know, I kind of want to warn you. I'm like, warn me about what? He goes, you're about to go through a huge awakening. I'm like, what? And he started asking me, like, hey, have you noticed like things have been shifting this, like any energy in your head and this and that? I'm like, okay. And he goes, you're about to go through it. He goes, when it happens, I want you to call me because you're okay. I'm like, what? He goes, when you go through it, it's going to be kind of rough, and you're going to think that something's wrong, or because when you wake up, it is a huge, massive shift. I mean, my God. So sure enough, I went through this awakening months later. I don't remember if it was 3 months or 6 months later, but it was definitely that year. And I did call him up. I remember I saved the number and I called him up and said, hey, what is this? And he goes, well, are you feeling like this energy in your head, like worms or bugs are crawling around like on your scalp? I was like, oh yeah. He goes, okay. He goes, yeah, you're going through I think he called it so it was the Kundalini energy, which I'd never heard of. In fact, he didn't even mention it in Hawaii. So I'm not even going to attempt to explain what I went through and the awareness, and it's like all of a sudden I could do healing on people. I did all kinds of spiritual stuff. Okay, I'm going to give you one example. This is more of the fun one. So I basically could read people's minds, and I could talk to them without talking, etc., etc. And so my sister was kind of like, Michael, what's going on with you? And I don't remember how we got to this part, but I told her, I said, yeah, I can tell you what card you're holding. She goes, no, you can't. I was like, yeah, it's an Ace of Hearts. So I said, pick another one. I was like, 7 of Clubs or whatever it was. And I just kept railing them off. And she's like, how are you doing that? And she goes, oh, you must have marked this deck of cards. I'm like, no, because I didn't live with her. I just lived actually a few blocks away. And I hadn't played cards in years. And so she goes, oh, okay. So they played a lot of cards. So they literally had brand new decks of cards. And she went back to her room. She goes, oh, okay. And she opens up a brand new package. It's wrapped up in plastic, etc. And I go, okay. I go, all I want you to do is just think of the number and imagine it in front of you. And you got to think of the whether it's clubs or heart or diamond or whatever. I got 10 in a row, and then 11, and then the 12th. And she just burst out crying. She goes, how are you doing this? And so I was like, Amber, I'm telling you, there's something going on with me. I'm going through this spiritual awakening. So there was a lot of really, really cool things that went on. I'm not going to put it in this video. Maybe I'll do like a live. I haven't did a live in a while. If you guys want me to do a live, let me know. I probably should do a live. It's been a long time. Probably a live about the experiences and things that happened. It was a lot of incredible stuff. So let's get back to Budokan. So Budokan was basically, it was the same experience when I walked into the temple with my ex-girlfriend. She was Laotian. She made everyone bow to me, all the nuns and the monks and the people there, and also my girlfriend, and that really pissed her off. And I was like, I go to kneel. No, stand up. And so I've said this story in 2 other videos. I'm not going to repeat it in depth, but he did this chant and this prayer for about, I think it was 15 minutes. I don't remember, 15, 20 minutes. And finally, he waved everyone off, and they're kind of like, what the hell were we bowing to this guy for? Because they had this look on their face like, because I was the only white dude there. And so he goes, okay, come and join us now. I was like, okay, and I kneeled down, I go, what's going on? And he says, you're the highest monk here. And I let, no. He goes, yes, you are. He goes, and he's grinning at me. He goes, you are inside, And I'm like, no. So Budokan was the one that walked me through my spiritual awakening, because it was a really amazing experience. It lasted 6 months. But it was also so unbelievable. I thought, man, am I losing my mind? Something like, what is this? So he goes, no, you're not losing your mind. Now he's translating through my girlfriend at this point. But what ended up happening was, I think it was the 3rd or 4th time we went there, she didn't need to translate anymore. I started talking to him in English while he was talking to me in Laos. That was an amazing experience. And she goes, "Wait, what's going on here?" Because I would say, yeah, I know, no, don't interrupt. And we're talking, and her mouth just dropped, and Buddha comes. He's like laughing and looking at her, looking at me. I'm like, what? I went, we've been talking without using the same language. So over the years, I kept going back, spending time with Buddha Calm, and he was doing a lot of healing on me, especially in the beginning. But he also was teaching me consciousness work, healing work, and all kinds of stuff. So what I want to share with you was something that really caught me off guard. Buddha Calm was funny, and I mean frickin' funny. And so the other thing, he broke the rules, and he would invite me into the back with the other monks. So there's a certain area where like only the monks are supposed to be, and he invited me back, and my girlfriend was like, I don't understand. So eventually he goes, oh well, he's one of us. And so I still kind of shrugged my shoulders, because he goes, you're a monk. I was like, yeah, okay. And I accept it now. Like, I understand what he means now, but back then it was, I understood it, but it was hard to accept. So real quick, in the image you're looking at, this is another temple in Richmond. The other one was in Stockton. Did I say Richmond for that one? So with Buddha Calm, that was in Stockton. This one is in Richmond, California. So, and in this temple, it was the same thing. In fact, right behind Buddha, this is Buddha Chandi right here on the right, and Buddha Maya is behind him. But right behind him was like a hallway with their rooms, and it kind of took a right turn. It was kind of a hangout area. And so Buddha Chandi did the same thing. I was always invited back there. And I want to say one thing about Buddha Chandi. Kind of sad. I'm going to try not to cry. Alright, so this actually happened twice, and yeah, I actually had to stop the video. Okay, so one morning I woke up and I just was crying and crying. And this happened with both Buddha Calm and Buddha Chandi, about 2-3 years apart. So I went to temple, and I've come in, and the monks were like, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know, I can't stop crying. I feel like someone's dying. And they called me back into Buddha Chandi's room, and sure enough, he was on his bed, and he was literally his very last day. Something happened to his liver. Nobody there really spoke English that well, but basically he had a surgery, and the surgery went wrong, and he was literally on his very, very last deathbed, or the last few moments. And so I got to hold his hand and be there in his room all the way up until about an hour before he died. So I'm going to throw this in also, because I think it's just as important, is I had moved away from where I used to live, about an hour drive from Stockton, where Buddha Calm was. And then so I moved away, far away, so about 2.5 hour drive. And Buddha Calm was raised up to the highest level. He was the highest monk in Northern California for all the Laotian temples. And so that's why I went to Sacramento, because that was like the head temple. And so what happened was, I think it was about 2 years later, approximately, I don't remember exactly, but what happened was I woke up just crying and crying and crying and crying. So I went to the Richmond Temple, which I don't think I'd ever went there. I think I drove by, but I don't think I might have went in there once or twice, but I don't think I did. And so I went, yeah, I didn't, because I came to the wrong entrance. I came to like the front entrance, which really is not where you have to go around the back. And so I remember knocking, and finally some guys, what are you doing? You're not supposed to come in this way. And he was kind of upset. And I'm like, oh, well, I explained, hey, I've been crying a lot, and I don't know why, and I would like to see a monk. So he had basically said, like, we're not seeing anyone today. The temple's not open. And I was like, okay. So I ended up going home, and I came back, I think it was a day or 2 days later, and a monk had greeted me around the back, and he invited me in, and he's like, what's going on? And so I had said, I keep crying and crying. I can't stop thinking about Buddha Calm. And he goes, Buddha Calm? And I was like, yeah. And I go, it started 2 days ago, and I came here, but the temple was closed and they wouldn't let me in. And he goes, well, that's because that's the day that Buddha Kam died. And so I woke up that morning, the day that he died. And so I think the reason why I'm sharing this story is because my entire journey was to find out, is this spiritual stuff real? I wanted to know with rock solid evidence. So I think there's a difference between someone who has faith and believes versus someone who knows. So there's people who believe and then there's people who know. I have had so many experiences, like when my grandma died, I'm not going to repeat that story, but it's the same thing. I woke up out of the clear blue sky, got this huge flash, ran upstairs, told my mom that my grandma died. And sure enough, she literally died that moment. My grandpa called about an hour to 2 hours later. He was at the hospital, grandma died in a car accident, etc. So all of these experiences have reinforced my awareness of absolutely knowing, not believing, but knowing there is a spirit world beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I'm not one of those people who believes because, oh, I went to church and I was told that you're supposed to have faith. No, I believe because I absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I want to say thank you guys for listening, and stay on your path. Keep moving forward regardless of how many times you get knocked down. The spiritual path is not an easy path, but it's a very, very deeply rewarding and meaningful journey that lets you know that life is worthwhile. There is a purpose. There is an absolute bigger, meaningful purpose to life. To just go out there and live it to the fullest. And the markers in the road will reveal themselves. The turns will show up and you'll know when to turn, because you have to turn. And you will have these experiences in your life too. Remember, click subscribe, click like, and make a comment. And God bless you guys. I'll see you in the next video.